All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Rise Urban Nation Podcast, where we spotlight Black and Pan-African entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers who are transforming their industries and communities. I'm your host, Taryell Simmons, and today we have an extraordinary guest. You know, I forgot to ask you if your Black mama pronounced it the same way she spelled it. Is it Kelli Lester?
No, it's Kelli.
Kelli, oh, see, look at, I should have known. We was talking about that right before the show because she asked me, she's like, how do you pronounce your name? I was like, well, you know, I had a Black mama and she throw that silent Y on there.
Gotta love them.
Gotta love them. All right, Ms. Lester is the co-founder and partner of Onyx Rising, a change management consulting firm that specializes in individual, team, and organizational behavior transformation. She is an expert in inclusive leadership, employee engagement, and fostering work environments where everyone can thrive. Kelli has been named one of Ebony's 30. I said Kelli again, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Instead of Kelli. Don't worry, we're going to get it right. Kelli has been named one of Ebony's 30 young leaders of the future and has over 2 decades of experience in leadership development, strategic consulting, and workplace culture enhancement. Today, we'll dive deep into what it takes to be an inclusive leader, how organizations can navigate major work shifts, and why protecting our greatest asset, our people, is key to success. So let's get into it. Kelli, welcome to Rise Urban Nation. It's an honor to have you. How are you doing this fine morning?
It's wonderful to be here. I am amazing. I'm not going to complain. It wouldn't do me any good if I did.
I'm going to tell you, some people are listening. Even if you think nobody's listening, people are listening.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, so let's talk about what led you to co-found Onyx Rising. I just like the name itself because, you know, I got Rise Urban Nation, you got Onyx Rising, and I feel like you a play cousin already. And how did your career path evolve into the work that you do today?
So let me speak to Onyx Rising quickly, and then I'll give you the journey. But so Onyx Rising actually started as Onyx Rising Financial Services, and my aunt and myself were doing a session at our church. And we were focused at the time only on financial wellness, which birthed out of this ask by the pastor to do a financial wellness or financial literacy program. And as you know, within our communities, we don't really talk about money at the dinner table. And so it really was an eye-opening experience because as people started to come to the session, it grew each week versus maybe the other way around. And luckily, the pastor had a thought around how can I really help my congregation, right, be financially whole and start to build legacy. So Onyx Rising was really birthed out of that to really focus on helping Black and Brown people rise above their circumstances. And then I ended up getting laid off of my day job. And that really, which I had already planned to go, this is really my third business. I had already planned to go on my own full time after my son went to college. But we're fearful. We're right on the edge, have all the skills, right? Have everything in us. But, we either become a slave to the dollar or fearful of what could happen, or we can't see, what God's really doing that's bigger than what we can think of. And so I got catapulted into it. And ironically, all my clients came with me. So it's a testament, I think, not making it about you, but just doing what you love, doing good work, and people will recognize that. So I ended up launching the second side of my business, which is really where I've spent the majority of my career in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, the clients really just came with me, followed me from the consulting. So, but Onyx Rising is near and dear to my heart because don't tell anybody, but I love helping people create a plan to rise from their circumstances. Most people just don't know how, right? They know it's a problem, but they don't know where to go. And really, what's that quote is a plan, goal without a wish is, a goal without a plan is a wish. So we really believe in creating that plan and we help clients do that.
I love that. I
So
love
that's
that.
the company. So I started out actually, I spent 10 years in communication. So my first job was at the Indianapolis Recorder newspaper, which is a Black newspaper here in Indiana.
What?
And I was an administrative assistant of all things, right? But I had went to school for communication, so I wanted to be Oprah when I grew up. That was my thing. You know, I had my own show.
This is
And
crazy.
this was my way to start. So I go to this newspaper. Obviously, it's Black owned, Black ran. The general manager really didn't even want me there. You know, he's like, I don't need an assistant. But
and you're like, yes, you do.
yeah, you know, and I'm like eager. So he set me down, and this is actually huge advice. He set me down after seeing my little busy self day in, day out for the first week. He said, look, we don't have a lot to offer you. We don't have a lot of money, right? But it's what you make it. You've been coming in here for the last week asking me every day what it is that you can do. You tell me what you can do. What do you want to do, right? And really, that was a gift. So yes, I didn't make a ton of money, but I then changed my mindset of whatever I thought an administrative assistant was. And by the time it was over, I was directing our first community affairs TV show. I was speaking on panels as a young woman. You know, so I mean, we got a lot of exposure. I was writing articles. I was a receptionist sometimes. I was in the community, you know, understanding and leading conversations about Black people and young people and how to eliminate barriers. So that was my start. While I was getting someone on the TV show, it was the new deputy mayor, and that deputy mayor was like, wow, we really need someone to help us communicate to the minority media. And essentially we had someone in our community that was like giving people the blues, right? He was like the Larry King, the Black Larry King, right? You know, and nobody knew how to handle it, right? You know, and so literally I got hired to help the mayor's office handle this situation and communicate with the minority media. I later then became, you know, supporting Black and minority businesses. I was supporting the deputy mayor of neighborhoods. And so that got me into community work. But essentially I was in public relations for 10 years and then community affairs, went to the radio station, and I fell into DEI through a project of recruiting young people for an internship program called the Bright Star program, where nobody knew about it. Nobody really cared about it. They gave me a TV show, a radio show, and obviously I was helping with overall community affairs. And I turned that program into a waiting list to help other minorities that wanted to get into media. And through that process, I got into HR, got into recruiting, got promoted, and led their first staffing department and their first, as an organization, their first DEI office. Because essentially what I was learning is I was recruiting, but people were leaving. And I was like, okay, there's something more to just this to the recruiting, right? And that's when I fell in love and learned about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really what's the role of leaders in keeping and retaining talent and cultivating a culture that helps us breed new ideas. And then leaving Indiana, I said, can I do this work in a, you know, I was a big fish in a small town to me. So I was like, can you really do it, with the big dogs, like when, cut your teeth on this in a bigger company. So I ended up luckily getting a phone call, got hired at Sara Lee Corporation, leading DEI for North America, and then eventually globally. Worked there for several years and then ended up doing consulting for the next, I think, 10 years. And then later, started my own thing. So that's my journey. I guess one thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet here, is when you work really hard at that thing that you love, right? When passion and your skill set intersect, right? It's not even work, really, right? You're like living in your purpose, really. But I would say that those 10 years in communications was necessary for me to be effective in the next 20 years. And while I was working each job, the next job door got open, right? Just by me doing, what I was called to do.
Man, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful story. So me and you have so many parallels in our story. This is gonna be crazy when I tell you this. But the one thing I do love about your journey is something that I always tell young folks or anybody, fall in love with the journey, because we get an idea and we focus on this outcome that we want, but the journey is what takes you to where you need to be, and
Yeah.
I've learned that later in life because I often had a plan for what I was going to do,
Yeah.
but then the journey took me somewhere else,
Yeah.
and then I no longer rely on just my plan alone because I know it's his plan and the
Yes.
ultimate, because all these little things that he put me into or
Yeah.
along the way, whatever your faith is, divine intervention, the universe, God, whatever you believe in,
Yeah.
these things all prepare you for the next thing. So
It's
no,
deep. It's deep.
yeah, it's
I
deep.
got when the transition came from doing just PR to DEI, it came at a promotion. And
Yeah,
I'm sitting in this beautiful office and lonely. Nobody wanted to talk to me because I got elevated to a place. They like, why you get that position? And
man.
the people there is like, who are you? And what do you know about HR? And I asked God, I was like, why do you have me here? And
Hmm.
and that connected my purpose. And what I heard back was, I need you to be a voice for the voiceless. What you did with that program was great, right? You were allowing, making sure people were aware of how to get in
Hmm.
this industry. But you're
Yeah.
here, and you might not. People don't like that you're there. People might not be talking to you. You don't have as many friends at work as you did before. But I have you there to help my people, to help us, right, get
Hmm.
into the organization. And so that was just like, it helped me to be the voice for the voices. We're in places and at
Hmm.
tables and in conversations where nobody's at, but what are we doing to help bring other people up?
Yeah. So let me tell you a little about my journey because you're gonna get a kick out of this. All right. So my major was in communications also. I was going into radio and television. And through that journey of radio and television, I worked for a radio station out here, a black-owned radio station called Magic 92.5 on that street time. And then, had some of the same conversations about, all right, what's your career path look like? And then the radio station then sold to a major corporation. Clear Channel bought
Yes.
them out, bought all of, and then so my career path started to look very dim and bleak, because although I was in the community out in the street team, I was too one of those outspoken people that
Yeah.
wasn't going to be able to play the politics right to maneuver in a career in there. So ended up transitioning to marketing, finished marketing, went into for-profit education. Didn't really like that too much, and then ended up somehow in the nonprofit space doing workforce development. In workforce development, I got the chance to work with the mayor's office to build a youth program for jobs for underserved youth, and I had to go out to the community and do these programs. Then I had to do other programs where I worked with disabled people, refugees, and so forth to build workforce development programs. But in doing that, I had to work with the HR teams of every company using federal, state, and private funding to put these programs to get people to work, right? So
Mm-hmm.
working with all these different HR. And then eventually that led me into HR. And then it led me into talent development where I had to train leaders based on
Wow.
some of the stuff programs that I put together.
Well,
So
you are my play cousin.
I know, right? That's why I was like, when you was telling your stories, like, oh, that was me.
Yep.
That's me too. Oh, that's me too.
Wow.
So look at God.
I know
see how
it.
works.
Thank you for the work you've done. I mean, even this, right? Like, you are documenting like a piece of history nobody else is, when your intent was just highlight us for other people to see us, but it's bigger. It's always
Yeah.
bigger. So I'm really glad
It's
we met.
always bigger. It's
Yeah.
always bigger. You know, you know, I want to dive deep into the challenges because leadership isn't just about making decisions; it's about managing challenges, fostering inclusion, and adapting to change. What's been one of the biggest challenges you faced in your career?
It's interesting because I think I just told you one of them.
Uh-huh.
Which is, but so let me maybe frame it differently because I still think that was the biggest one.
Gotcha.
And so let me back up and then maybe share, because you'll be familiar with this given what you just said.
Mhm.
I'm trying to be careful here. So
You ain't got to be careful with us.
but it's forever recorded.
I get what you say. This is gonna be aired. So
We gotta be real. We have to be real. So I'm gonna go there. So in the sale of radio,
uh-huh.
I will liken, instead of the radio station being bought by a bigger one that had already happened when I arrived, it was actually a radio station that was sold to, it was a Black station, but it was sold to the minority company, right? A very well-known minority company, which I think was good for the heritage station.
Gotcha.
Unfortunately, in the sale of that station, it took down the frequency where it used to go further. It was now, okay. So it was like, oh, you get the letters of the station.
Nah.
You get the history of the heritage station, and also you get the talent. Okay. But we're keeping the frequency. We'll give you one of our other smaller, right? So for Black people in the community in Indiana, that wasn't a good move. But 14 of us, was it 14 or 12? Nope, it was 14 people. 14 people as part of that separation got promoted, and we want to keep y'all into the bigger, broader conglomerate. So that was part of the rub, is that sometimes you're in a position that is an opportunity for you, right? And this is, I think, really tough for people of color. It will force you to be isolated from that which is familiar, okay? And we're ultimately sometimes, I hate to say it, we're a lot of times we're still the first. We're still the first. And so when we're put in a position, in this case, I was put in a position to be one of a very few people of color.
Yeah.
And what I feel was to do a job that was so necessary. And it can't be that it was only necessary there. It's necessary everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And once you've achieved your task or objective or whatever in that season, another one will come that will grow you further. So to me, that was challenging because I was isolated. The words I used at the time was, it was a modern day slave trade and a separation of, other people in my community.
Yeah.
But yet I had work to do, and now placed when what everybody saw was a promotion with a big office, right? But even the people where I was didn't want me there, right?
Yeah.
They didn't want me there. They didn't think I was qualified to be there. They didn't understand it. And so that's the first lesson, is that you may be isolated. I want to add a second lesson is, in a year's time, because I was asked, what am I supposed to do here? What's my purpose? And then delivered on that, almost over delivered. I got the trust of the head of HR, right?
Yeah.
He was like, she's smart. I don't care what she went to school for, that she doesn't have HR experience. She's amazing. And I exceeded all of my goals. Yeah. And then he put me in a tough position. He said, I understand now, right? That, how you felt. And he was probably part of it, right? But in the end, the other colleagues of mine, he said, your next goal, because you're very goal driven, is that I'm only going to give you a goal that is when it's connected with others achieving it. So I never, from that point, okay, we see you can win, but can you win when it's only connected with others? And so I believe that was a challenge, but also a life lesson, right? For me to get out of, it ain't about me, and that when we're successful, especially in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, it is when we partner with others. It's when we connect with other people that don't look like us. And so my purpose evolved from being a voice for the voiceless to being in those rooms to influence people that had greater power, that can open up more doors for underrepresented people. And so yes, it's uncomfortable. And I think that's the lesson, is that discomfort cannot exceed your willingness to be obedient or to be kind to yourself relative to your craft.
Yeah. And I think we all sitting in that discomfort around COVID and when George Floyd happened, where, a lot of people say the revolution wouldn't be televised, but we got to see it televised. Yeah. And now people were forced to make a decision, and people were forced to, really have more inclusive conversations, hard and difficult conversations, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I had to stop talking to the choir and go over and talk to the executive who happened to be, a white male, right? So Yeah.
And I think, all that to say, I might want to get a hot take from you real quick. In looking at how we're in today's climate, right? We've seen a shift away from DEI initiative in some spaces, and I'm wondering, in your own humble opinion, how do leaders stay committed to inclusion
Yeah.
in the face of all these setbacks right now?
Yeah. So the answer, whether you're a company or a leader, is stick to the core. If I could
Hmm.
just put it simply, stick to the core.
Yeah.
Because first of all, if you're an organization, quick, you want to make sure that as you're looking at this effort, whatever it looks like or whatever it evolves into, you have to make sure you're aligning where there is alignment, right? So if your whole
Hmm.
goal is as a university is to get students or to make sure everybody in the plan or organization feels like they belong, or to ensure productivity or to reach a new market, or it's about talent. So your effort may evolve to sound different. It may become about generational diversity, right?
Hmm.
But you want it very connected to your core. So, for example, I worked with a client that they're losing all of their leaders in the next 5 years because they're retiring, right?
Hmm.
And they haven't done effective workforce planning.
Hmm.
Simultaneously, the marketplace has changed, and who uses their products, if they don't start connecting to younger people, they will not be as successful as an organization.
Yeah.
So, talent and young talent became part of the core of the DEI strategy, if you will, futuristically, to drive
Yeah.
their business. So when you stick to the core, that you're okay. As a leader, you have to start thinking about, what does leadership look like? Leadership yesterday,
Hmm.
leadership today, and even leadership in the future looks different. So leadership when I was coming up was command and
Hmm.
control. Nowadays, they want
Mm.
leaders to actually engage with their staff to understand them so they know how to motivate them. Everybody got
Hmm.
motivated the same way, whether that was a motivation for you or not back then, right?
Yeah.
So we are now recognizing differences in workplaces, but true leadership to lead who you're leading now, because they don't look the same. Right? Everybody,
Yeah.
some people are remote, some people are of color, some are women, some are transgender, some, whatever it is, right? So we have to
Hmm.
really understand that the future of leadership is inclusive leadership. Because
Yeah.
it's like, if you think about a family, I don't know if you have children, but if you have
Yeah.
more than
I
one
do.
child,
Yeah.
you might want them to both graduate from college, but what does the pathway look like to motivate them to do so? It looks different. If not, as one pastor called it, lazy parenting. I said, right? If you think you're just going to copy and paste, he said. And I was like, well, with leaders, we cannot copy and paste the same approach.
Yeah.
So I would suggest to leaders is how you lead, and
Mhm.
checking in with your staff around that, right? Almost getting a performance review on you, right?
Yeah.
Will determine if you will be the best leader you can be. Because a good leader doesn't know how to lead just one or two types of people. They know how to
Mhm.
lead everybody to
Yeah.
success. And so
Yeah.
unlocking some of our biggest workplace challenges, business challenges, will require inclusive leadership.
I like where you're going with this. Let's continue down that rabbit hole of like looking at those solutions specifically around success, because you've helped organizations implement successful inclusive leadership programs, and I think there's a lot of organizations that could really use
Yeah.
your help in doing that. What are some of the most effective strategies that you've seen in action when doing this?
Yeah. So it could be a slow burn or fast, right? But and I'm gonna answer this based on the climate. Because
Hmm.
the short answer is, in addition to sticking to the core, is embedding DEI right
Hmm.
into our inclusive leadership, or workplace strategies, whatever you're calling it, but
Yeah.
embedding this into all of our work. So that means your current leadership development training should have it embedded. Not just
Hmm.
why it's important, similar to what I was sharing, but a more specific case for change, a
Hmm.
more specificity on our approach when engaging our teams, or leading our teams, or giving our teams feedback. So again, embedding that into our existing leadership development courses. The other thing would be in how we recruit, where we recruit, how we interview. So for example, let's say we have inclusion or any value, right? Whatever your company values are, you should not only post them on the website, but you should also embed them into your assessment of talent when they're coming in the door and annually. So I should be able to self-assess, okay, well, yeah, great. We used to call it the what and the how. The what would be your goals and objectives, but the how would be, did you achieve it and leave dead bodies in the way? So that wasn't in alignment with our values, right? So we have to hold each other accountable. So I would say organizations and leaders really need to embed this into our assessment of performance. So that way we can kind of check and make sure. We talked about it early on. Oh, it's in our DNA, right? But what does that look like? And so creating organizational values and then putting them in your performance processes or performance management assessments. And then I think most people forget about this. I mean, obviously there's different suppliers as well, but I really want to touch on, I think, how your business grows or how your organization achieves its mission. And I think that is going to create way more value and interest to make sure this effort becomes relevant. If you haven't made it relevant, that's part of the problem why it's not going to stick. Yeah. So, for example, how you go to market, how you reach extended markets, how you sustain the organization, helping organizations understand that we won't attract young talent if we're not out in the community actually, demonstrating our commitment, right? Or giving, right? So, because young talent is looking for that, right? So I think I really wanted to focus on the marketplace. And if you are trying to reach younger audiences or diverse audiences with your product, you want to bring them to the table to know how to reach them in your planning, ideally. But then also, you need to embed that in your sales training, right? Yeah. So I think it's embedding is really the short answer to the way we make sure it's relevant and that this work continues and that we actually reach greater outcomes in our organizations.
Nah, I like that. And I'm gonna challenge you on the spot here a little bit just to see if we can give a different example, because I'm also thinking about today's climate where, because I'm speaking with a lot of the clients and like, all right, I don't know what to do, Taryell, or they might say, Kelly, I get that. However, federal government just banned DEI and DEI has become political. So, and we get, 50% of our revenue from government contracts. So now I have to take all this language down and so forth, or else it's going to bankrupt us. But at the same time, the consumers are wanting to know that you're in line with, DEI inclusion. So how do I implement this? It is part of our core. How do I implement this when I have to take the language off my website and I have to, make it look differently because it's I can't use those exact words. What does it look like then?
Yeah, to me, that's the easier part. So I'm looking at the current climate a little differently, or let me explain. So I've recently done a 3-part series. The first step is rebranding and reframing DEI. So to me, what your question really referred to is the person that is in academia or is in government and they've eliminated it, right? So when I say stick, so you do need to change the name. I'm not against that. Really, on a personal level, I might have some challenges, but organizationally, if you're a business or if you're a mission-driven organization, when I say stick to the core, I mean stick to the core. So what is your specific organizational challenge around from a DEI perspective? So we may not be saying DEI. We may be saying generation. We may not be saying DEI. We may be saying it's about having a mobile workforce that's all completely engaged. We may not be saying DEI. We may be saying continuous improvement. And if you know anything about Six Sigma and continuous improvement, it's about bringing people together from various perspectives that are closest to the problem to solve the problem. Right? So the different voices. So sometimes we actually have to prove DEI, if you will, in our organizations. We have to show people the value. So we must have what is it? And if it's not the words DEI, whatever the words are, define it. Why is it important? Why should anybody give a dog? Why should we care? So if you're in government, we have to say, hey, our citizens are made of all of these different races, genders, and dynamics. This is what's going on in our city, right?
Yeah.
And then we have to say, so therefore, our why to connect to this word or phrase is because we need to serve the citizens. So if you don't have and I call that a case for change. So that's table stakes. You got to have that. And at this stage, if you haven't had that clear, or you're revisiting it based upon the fact that legalities have put you in a position where you have to change the words, then it doesn't matter. You change the words, you don't stop the work, but you do need to refine the words in a way that makes sense for your organization, whether you're nonprofit, for-profit, academia, government, but you've got to get at what that is. I did some work for Nashville once. And at the time, Nashville was the most, there was the most cranes in the whole city, in the country at the time were there. They were seeing an influx of a particular community from another country, so much so that people were bringing livestock, no kidding here, to to the DMV or whatever, right? Because where they come from, that was considered standard. So that was blowing staff members' mind. They didn't even know how to deal with that, right? But what they had to stop and realize, this city has changed. The number of people in this particular demographic is large, and we still have to do city business. Yeah. So what do we need to do to equip our leaders and our staff to do their jobs, right? So it's not the words, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's the work. And are we equipped to do our work, to achieve our mission, to achieve our goals, to achieve our objectives?
Love that. Now, in doing the work, looking at your bio and some of the stuff that you've been able to implement, you talk about intentional inclusion a lot. What does that really look like in practice?
Oh, yeah, that's a beautiful question. So I have 7 inclusive leadership traits and I'm not going to go into all of them, but that I teach and have been teaching for some time. And I believe that all change agents or change ambassadors in the organization need to lead in this way, right? And it's embodying that. So let me be clear on the who, right? Because yes, I do mean all people leaders, period. Executives, everybody. Council leaders. I also mean human resource professionals. And of course, if you're in DEI practitioners. So resource group leaders are also very, very critical. And we must understand these and embody these. So one of them, the number one, is self-awareness. If we don't understand our own lens, why we think the way we do. My mentor, Doug Harris, he always said, you're okay to think the way you do, but you're wrong if you think everybody thinks that way. Right. And so we really have to understand, why do I make the decisions I make? Why do I value people at this level when they give me advice versus someone at this level, or someone that went to, looks like this versus that, right? The messenger. We really need to understand where that comes from before we just start trying, because leaders will have to say, just Kelli, tell me what to do. Yeah. Before I tell you what to do, you have to really understand you and your filter. So self-awareness is number one, but the other one.
Let me say something to that. Like, this is something that I've been telling to my DEI team. Because they've gotten wrapped up in all the semantics and everything that's going on, and then saying, "Oh, we need to go and force this community of people to do this, or make sure they hold them accountable to this." And I'm like, no. What we need to do, like, why is this triggering you? Like, most of this work is self-work. Why is it triggering you? And then how are we, because we're not even jiving right now, communicating through these changes.
Yep.
How are we going to communicate differently so we show up differently, right? Before we could go out and influence the rest, because we're not even jiving right now because of
that's it.
How we're showing up in the space.
That's the core. That's the core of the change ambassador. That
Yeah.
if there was one thing Onyx Rising focuses on outside of financial wellness on this inclusive leadership side, it is equipping those change leaders to lead effectively. And it does start with us, because it's not just what I know, it's my being. And I don't think people know how to be, right? Because they don't even know themselves. So self-awareness, and not to get all deep here, but self-awareness, just understanding our style, our behavior, our privilege. Where did some of these biases that we even have come from? What are my trigger words? I have trigger words, right? So when I train or co-facilitate with somebody, we talk to each other about, okay, if this happens, so you can step in if I'm looking crazy, right?
If you see me look like this, that means you need to step in. You gotta, because I'm trying to sit with. I can't hold space if I'm sitting with a bunch of trigger words, because
right.
I need to see how much I'm gonna pop up.
Right, exactly. So self-awareness is key. Again, there's other traits, amplifying diverse voices, so amplifying others. There's a lot on feedback, right? So knowing how to seek feedback, receive difficult feedback, and then give it, right? Because I think, like, for example, somebody on your team comes to you and they say something, and or anybody comes to you, and it was difficult for them to come to you to say that, to share, to be vulnerable, or to give you some feedback, let you know something's off with your game. How we receive that will depend on if they ever come back. And it builds a closeness. So I do think seeking, giving, and receiving feedback effectively across lines of difference is huge, right? And I think when we're operating at a higher level, which is another trait, people talk about emotional intelligence a lot, but I've actually put together that emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence. It is no longer okay, people, to think that just because someone speaks Spanish, they must be from one culture. We should at least know these are multiple countries represented. Same thing with the Asian country, continent of Asia. So we know that there's multiple countries. So we can no longer kind of just get away with that, right? So there is some expectation. And then the higher we ascend, the more expectation is there, right? So it's not just am I leading in a way that's inclusive? Am I setting up meetings where I am being cognizant of my introverts? Did I send an agenda in advance so that they can really contribute their best? Did I assess and ask my staff, what does a good day look like for you? Anyone I hire, that's the first conversation we have. I share first, who I am, things I like, my preferences, that I'm a morning person. And I ask them similar questions, because just because I'm a morning person, out of respect, I'm not going to text you at 4 a.m. if that doesn't work for you. But I've had people say, text me. I'm not going to answer. Right. But this seems simple, but I'm not assuming you're an extrovert. I'm not assuming that you can take questions at the drop of a hat, so that those are the
but
practical
to your
skills.
point, this is the key in how we create these diverse environments, because I think sometimes we get stuck in a operation setting of doing things. So we've been in my day job, we've been on this neurodiversity push and learning about how the workforce isn't designed for neurodiverse people. I'm a ADHD leader who came up through a system that was often never meant for me to thrive and survive. So I had to figure out how I was going to put these things in, to be successful. So I think what you're saying is very important, but how do organizations create environments like that where they can attract and retain diverse talent?
Yeah, well, that's a loaded question. So I usually, it's a big question, right? I don't think it's I don't think it is one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
I think, so I do assessments as well, right? And there's a assessment tool that a lot of people don't know about. It's only been out about 3 years, called ISO, International Standard of Operation. And so I highly recommend that if you're in this space. You do need to be certified to do it, or you can get a certifying body. But the key is you want to really assess the health of your organization to know what levers to pull. right? Because
Gotcha.
sometimes we can spend money, time, and energy on something we don't even need, right? Like what are our people saying? And so, yes, an inclusion survey, all those things will help you figure that out. But what I will say in general is that you talking to and understanding the pulse of your culture. So an engagement survey to me at a minimum would be critical. But so that would help you understand where you are and then where you need to be. Similarly, you do need a development program in some capacity for leaders. Does it have to all be training in a classroom? No, right? No. It could be reverse mentorships. Right? Something very organic. Okay. Because we need to develop new talent, and we need our leaders to be exposed to younger talent, or whatever dimensions are a gap for you. So even looking at a snapshot of your workforce will help you understand that. If you think about it, employee resource groups exist because they are often a minority in the organization. Right? You need a women's group because you lack women or whatever, people of color or whatever. So you want to really understand the issues, and it's not a peanut butter spread or one size fits all. But I believe engagement surveys, leadership development experiences, so that could be classroom and outside of the classroom follow-up. Executives need to find their voice on this topic. It cannot be that it's only coming from the DEI leader or the HR person. It doesn't even hold as much value, right? We also need to really tell the successful stories internally. Where has it worked? Show me what good leadership looks like. Right. So we keep talking about inclusive leadership or intentional inclusion, but we're not showing people do we reward people for it? Right? In your organization, I'm not saying you just need to do an inclusive leadership award, but what I am saying is if people keep seeing people get promoted that don't represent what we're saying that is, we're saying something. So are we calling people in, and if you will, and highlighting those people that are demonstrating the ideal leaders that we want to see in our organization?
Yeah, I was having a conversation the other day with, a couple of folks, and, this was a highlight of, those marginalized voices. Like, how come the company always making announcements? We always make announcements. We never celebrate or share the other stories or allow other people to share their stories. It's always an announcement. Like you're the beholder of all the information.
Exactly. But that's a two-way conversation. That's exactly what companies miss. They're not doing that.
Yeah. And so that's why I love everything about what you just said. And speaking of stories, can you share a success story from your work, perhaps a company that transformed its leadership culture?
Yeah. So I think my favorite, there's two in my head. My favorite story, I think, around, it's probably a financial services company, right? So a financial services company that I have been working with for years was really unsure and very afraid, very conservative around employee resource groups. Like, should we have them? What's the value? How can we make sure that it's actually not forced on people, right? But that it grows. And they were a culture, I believe, that historically was they weren't this bad, but command and control, kind of what you said, that saying one thing and it trickles down, top down communications. So even the approach I was suggesting for these groups was foreign for them. So to me, this client is a success because they went in and they led the way through this initiative, if you will, this launch of two employee resource groups, to say, this is truly employee-led. We've never been here before.
Wow.
Right? They were acknowledging that this is not their normal, culture or the way that they've done it. And we need you to help us shape this. Right. Yeah. And so, years later, they have 4 employee resource groups. They are the most successful thing that people talk about in this, not just in their survey for DEI, but period. It is also where people have made connections and promotions. So there's some informal successes as well. So they really grew as an organization. And they then came back and they did an assessment of their policies, started changing and embedding. They were also one of my first clients that embedded new values, right? And made their quote unquote DEI strategy became the company strategy. So they were one of my first clients early on that embedded DEI into their company strategy. And it was, all very embedded in terms of the plan. Now, the execution of it took time, right? So they're still not where they want or need to be. But I do believe, to me, the success story is taking the risk and understanding that these types of, whether it's a program like that or a mentorship program, that you are the incubator that leads the way. It's like changing the culture inside out. And so now the majority of their employee base are part of an employee resource group. So, I mean, it's just, you wouldn't even think ERGs would be able to have this much impact, but it really, really has,
That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story. As we think about the future of leadership, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned throughout your career?
Yeah. So you asked me, I think I was looking at, I'm going to answer this two ways. So first is my life quote. All right. And I saw, because this is one question you did send me. Everything else has been on the fly, and I like it. But I'm an extrovert that can deal with it.
I should have warned you. I was like, man, this is too good just to go with the basic ones.
You were going off that. So I'm okay with that. But I did think about this question. And so my life quote is, life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And a lot underneath that, right? I have a chronic illness, and I didn't find out about it until I was 27 years old. And so I found myself like 27 with a pill box. It was like really, monumental, because I thought I was invincible, right? And so it kind of took me to a certain place. And I was like, through that and finally getting healthy again, I had to really realize I'm not going to let this thing define me. Right. And so from a life lesson perspective, I know part of the question was coming from career. That really is it. It's applicable, right? Even in career wise or any aspect of life. But it's like, don't ruminate on what you did wrong or what mistake you made. I mean, yes, identify it, but move on to what is the plan. So it's not probably a secret when I kind of spoke to, having a plan to rise, right? So it's like, how do I really take this situation and see it as an opportunity? So to me, that's the biggest life lesson. This is more career advice, I think, based, and I'll try to be brief here, but the short tidbit or nugget is, make sure you have a board of directors. And what I mean by that is, an organization is not going to be thinking about your future long-term life and career. Some do. Some organizations actually say, okay, what's your plan? What's your aspirations? Where do you want to be in 3 to 4 years or 5 years or 10 years? But I would encourage you to be sure you have your own plan. So participate in whatever's going on in your organization and keep your own board of directors. So your own board of directors looks like this. I started out in communications. I had people on my board of directors that were in the communications field. When I started tapping into HR, I had to add people that were in HR. And when I got to DI, I had to add people that were in DEI. Starting to learn about more and more about entrepreneurship and technology. As I got laid off and kind of thrust into entrepreneurship, I had to add more business owners and entrepreneurs. So as your career evolves, you too need to evolve. Now, the hard part of me getting there was probably kind of two very quick things. Number one is I've been laid off twice. I'm probably, because of my age, people are like, just twice? But I was laid off twice. And that's why I shared that board board of directors thing that I always have to have a play and not depend on the organization only. And maybe the biggest challenge that I had is very connected to DEI, very connected to being an inclusive leader and amplifying diverse voices and being an advocate for them, is I had a boss that hired me, one of the best leaders I've had. And what she did is she had a very diverse team. And there was an opportunity where in this particular company, you could not move up in human resources until you worked in the field. It was a spoken, unspoken rule. I was at a point where I was a director and had the opportunity to go to the VP level. And I was a high potential. And in this room, they were having a conversation about the high potential people in HR to take this opportunity in the field, which would have been a short-term thing, while they backfilled it with a person that was multilingual, right?
Yeah.
Because the plant had 7 different languages that they had.
7 different languages?
Yeah, so it was a great diversity opportunity for me. So my name came up. And someone said in the room, well, Kelly's a single mom. She can't do that. So there was an assumption made that I would not be able to take advantage of this opportunity. And my boss said, well, let's ask her. We don't know, And that advocacy when I wasn't in the room, that sponsorship when I wasn't in the room, made the difference in my career. I honestly don't think I would be sitting here today had she not just said, ask her. And as a result, I had my family come in and take care of my son. I flew out and took care of that, had that wonderful opportunity. So again, keep your board of directors and expand them as needed. And remember, whatever situation you're in, 10%, it's just 10% of what happens to you. How are you going to react? What are you going to do?
Love that. Love that. That's some good advice. By the way, I was laid off 2 times as well. So I told you we play cousins up in here.
I know it. I see
it. For someone starting their leadership journey, I know you gave some really good tidbits, but I want you to package up into let's say, what are the first 3 things you think one should focus on if they're really beginning their leadership journey and they get inspired by your story and they're like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do in my career, right? I want to be able to create inclusive leadership spaces like we talked about today. What are those first 3 things that they should focus on that you would give to them?
Yeah, so it's well, I'm going to speak to this from people in different stages in their career, right? Okay. So if you're really, really early on, internships and volunteering for DEI conferences, being on the planning committee, whether that's local or national or whatever it is, and whatever that means to you, right? Because within the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you do need to choose what's your favorite, right? Are you more, I want to be a DEI leader, I want to be a consultant, I want to do education more so and culture, or, am I into assessment? I mean, you do need to kind of figure out, because it's broad, right, where you want to play. But outside of understanding where you want to play, I do think it's kind of critically important to create enough experiences so you can figure out what you don't like, what you do like. And whether you are new and internships make sense, or you're volunteering and, connecting to see the inside of, how does this conference work? And you're also now in a space with other people that can help you catapult your career, because networking is still the best way. Right. So the other thing is, as far as on your leadership journey, generally speaking for this space, I do think it's important that you get maybe very, very focused on who your model is, right? Who do you want to be, right? Like, I know I talked about earlier when I wanted to get in television, it was Oprah, right? To some degree, now you all are in a much more fortunate space because there is at least enough DEI leaders or companies that are demonstrating. So I think it's really important to have a vision around like, who am I modeling, right? Or is it multiple people? Or is it about the culture that you want to work in, right? Like what does, and who has that? And you really need to get immersed and experience that. For example, one thing that I felt was keeping me from understanding this topic globally is that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have global experiences early in my career. And so going to a city or a town or country for work is one thing, going personally is another. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess you do have to be immersed in other cultures. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's some people that feel like because I'm quote unquote a person of color, I'm already diverse. No, you're not.
Nah.
Right? Like you could so it's you really have to identify what your areas of privilege are and
Yeah.
where might be your gaps, and then immerse yourself, or where you're maybe your, I don't want to say dominant culture, but what demographics do you fall in, and are you intentionally putting yourself in other places, because the key
Yeah.
learnings are going to come there. For more
Absolutely.
experienced leaders, IDI, Intercultural Development Inventory, is a
Mm-hmm.
self-assessment around inclusive leadership. So it really will, to me, touch on you as a leader, or if you are as a practitioner, it will give you on a continuum how you interact with the difference. And this is a global, assessment, very well known, tested for many years. I'm certified to help give people feedback on where their results, but it
Mm-hmm.
really is huge on helping you understand your gaps. That's going to help you as a leader, as a practitioner, if you are a practitioner, and it's going to help you just in general as you grow, right? So those are just a few tips, probably not, as concise as I want it to be, but hopefully that's helpful in terms of looking at our personal leadership journey.
Love that, love that, and I love some of those assessments too, because you get to see where your bias gaps are,
Oh
and
yeah.
then put plans together to work on those gaps. All right, Kelly, we could go on for
I
days.
know.
I could talk to you forever, but
But,
I try to keep. We're gonna have to do a part two because there's so many other questions I got in my mind
I
and
would
things
love
that we didn't
that.
get to so we won't have to get together again. Um, but this conversation has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for sharing your journey, your wisdom, and your
Um,
passion for inclusive
Thank
leadership.
you. Thank you. And we can address it on part two, but I do want to leave your listeners. I think you still do the resources piece?
Yeah. So that's what I was about to
Yeah.
say. Before we wrap up, what resources do you got? Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more
Yes.
about your work?
Yes.
Go ahead,
Yes.
take it away.
All right. So I'll end with that. So resources. So you can reach Onyx Rising and myself at www.onyx, the number 2, rise.com. So please join us. We have an upcoming event coming up as part of our 3-part series, and it's really about embodying the change. It's actually a 2-hour wellness retreat for practitioners who I believe have compassion fatigue right now in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really want to help practitioners protect themselves as they go out and lead. So you can go to our website, find out about that. Part 3 is on March 20th. And again, it's a 2-hour. So my 2 resources, because I love your 1, 2, 3, is a book called Purpose Driven Life. And, so I'm a PK, a preacher's kid.
Okay.
So that's my excuse. But Purpose Driven Life is written by Rick Warren.
Okay.
And so if you're a faith-based person, if you're not, I just feel like Purpose Driven Life helped me align on what my purpose is very clearly. And it's a study kind of book. So you can, read a chapter, put it down, read it. On the business side, the E-Myth Revisited. And the E-Myth Revisited is the subtitle is Why Small Businesses Don't Work and What to Do About It. And what the big lesson was this piece on understanding that how do you transition from being a great performer, individual contributor in a company to, we call that being the technician, to being the business owner. And that book, helped me so much. So I just wanted to leave that with your listeners as well. And definitely please reach out. I'd love to continue the dialogue.
Yes, absolutely. And don't worry, if you're driving, I'm going to put all those links in the show notes. I'm going to get it from her along with her website, social media links, and anything that you could do to engage with Onyx Rising. Thank you again, sis, so much for joining us. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Remember, leadership is not just about the title, it's about the impact. Stay intentional, stay inclusive, and keep rising. Until the next time, this is Rise Urban Nation. See you on the next episode. Peace.